Hello, everybody. It's Marsha Casper and we are starting in a minute, less than a minute. Well, hopefully everything went well here. And Joanne,
Test, 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 test.
yes, you're in. You're in.
Hey,
You
good
are in.
morning.
Just like you're doing a movie, we're here. We're here.
And we're live.
We
Okay.
are live. We are live. Uh, for those of you that have tried to get in with an app today with podcast, I don't know what happened. So we'll see how this goes. I think you're on your computer, right?
I am on my
Yeah.
computer.
So we will begin the show, which we are already. So I've been doing shows for 16 years, so this is a different system, but we're here and we keep trying to get this right, and I think we're getting there. But now something is with Podbean, so I don't really know, but it's going to be a great show today because Joanna's been on before, and she's a writer, director, producer. She does it all. So, Joanne, tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how it's just so many years. We already know each other so many years. A
I'm
lot
I'm trying to think of how we met. Was it when I was doing
with Mars. Yeah, I think.
with Marcy Henna and when
Mhm.
we last spoke?
Yeah,
Right, right.
we just must have met on Facebook. Then you could meet people on Facebook through other people. But now I don't know. It doesn't work the same. I don't see everybody all the time.
No, it's weird. It's become kind of what's a good word? Your your feed is populated with stuff that you never expected to see,
Yeah,
and nor do you want to see again.
I don't even know anybody. I don't even know half the people.
I don't know half the people, and a lot of my friends have disappeared. And it's weird because I was really using Facebook to reconnect with people from high school, college, different work, and then also to reach out to people that like my movies and want to hear more about what's coming up next or what kind of projects I'm on. And so it really has started to fail me in some respect, but I guess it's one of those things. It's free and you can't control it as much as you'd like. So here we are.
I'm on a lot of social media, but anyway, before we go talk about social media, because that is a huge problem these days for people connecting and listening to things. So just tell everybody how you started. How did you start? Maybe just
Oh gosh, it's
I don't
interesting.
usually ask that, but you have so many things that you've done over the years.
I have, and I started pretty young when I was in, I guess, junior high. I really fell in love with the idea of storytelling and visuals, and I think part of that's due to my grandparents. They were both in the somewhat in the peripheral industry. My grandfather managed big movie palaces for Warner Brothers, so that
Wow.
it was the 5,000 seaters, and this was in Pittsburgh. And these were, that's where everybody went for entertainment back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, prior to TV. And my grandmother was in college and working as a box office girl at this theater, and that's where they met when they were in their 20s.
Oh,
And
that's
then
sweet.
so I would hear stories about the heydays of the film business, and back then the studios created the films that went to their theaters. So Warner Brothers created movies that went to the Warner Brothers theaters, and then I think that was all busted up in the 50s with some kind of anti-monopoly trust bust thing. But
Hmm.
it was an interesting time. And
Uh-huh.
so obviously we were a big Warner Brothers family back in the day with all the different. There was a lot of stars that had signed contracts with Warner Brothers, and I think a good example would be their roster would people like oh gosh, Edward G. Robinson. They did a lot of the villain slash bad guy movies, Humphrey Bogart, and those kind of shows. So anyway, I kind of grew up watching movies and going with my grandfather to the theater, and then had an interest from the age of 12, and then moved into cell animation back in the days when you were doing all kinds of projects where you're a kid and what interests you and your extracurricular activities. And so I made a lot of 8 millimeter and super 8 millimeter animated films, and then some live action films, and then pursued that in college. And then, by the grace of God, have been working in the industry since I finished college, and that was quite a few years ago. And I've seen a lot of changes in the
Yeah,
industry.
there are a lot. We talk about old movies a lot here, because I
Oh,
love
really?
them.
Okay,
I
yeah,
do watch them with my mother, my grandmother. We watched my sister. We watched all the old movies. Uh,
yeah. And
yeah,
my dad, because he was a latchkey kid, instead of going home, he went straight from school to the movie theater. And again, it was a 5,000 seater, so it was a big place. He'd fly his little airplanes in there and just kind of hang out and watch movies. And he could name every bit player, every non-star, every actor, every
yeah,
star, obviously. But so I grew up knowing who Veronica Lake was,
yeah.
and all these people that were stars in their day that may be forgotten now. But I have a real
Well,
great
there are some
affinity.
sites. I think there are some sites, and I get that. There's something where it says old movies.
Uh-huh.
So we, I watch movies after movie from years ago, and even on Prime, I think, because your movies are there too. But I mean, you can put in old movies sometimes, and they all come up. You know,
Right.
some of them it's not really, like it. Everybody doesn't want to keep paying for things because we all pay for all the things to begin with.
Right.
I
Yeah, we're
started
getting
paying now,
subscriptions
right?
today.
I have every station, and then all of a sudden I have to pay for more things. So,
Right.
but
So I'm
sometimes I
kind of,
just want to see it, so I pay. But I like Joan Crawford. I just
oh
love her.
yeah.
She's like my all time. She's a person that I have inside me that goes, "You could do this," and because I just her strength on the screen.
Right. And
You,
her backstory is pretty fascinating too. So you hear about what these women endured and struggled with in
oh,
order to make it.
it was
Uh,
horrible. It was
One of
hard.
my favorites was Katharine Hepburn. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
you talk about a pioneer and a woman that was way ahead of her time, and she was pretty. And I'm going to use this word, ballsy.
yeah,
I
she was.
don't know if you can use that word, but I just
Yes, she
did.
was. Yeah.
And really had a sense of self-worth. And so when they told her no, she just persisted, and I really give her a lot of credit.
I like her. One of my favorites that she did is Desk Set. I watch it over.
Oh yeah, she had some quite a rapport with Spencer Tracy,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then you
And
put
it was so. I mean, it just was so. I tell people all the time. Because I did write screenplays. I do write them, so screenplays. But it's the dialogue that I think a lot of people, which you will get this, is that if they watch these old movies, they will really learn how to do better dialogue.
right, and I think there are a few every once in a while, like Shondaland, which is
Oh,
her writing's incredible.
yes, it
Um,
is.
Taylor
Mhm.
Sheridan's doing a really great job writing. He's
Oh,
certainly in one genre at
yeah.
this point, but he's a great writer. And then, of course, Aaron Sorkin. So we do have some
Yeah. They're
incredible
really good. Yeah, they are great.
writers. And
Yeah.
then some of the more my contemporary favorites would be like a Nora Ephron, who was an incredible script writer
Oh, great.
and then
Mhm.
became a great director as well.
Yeah.
So I'm real pleased to say that these folks kind of set the tone for women in film
Yeah.
today,
Yeah.
but they were very much pioneers when they were kind of in the trenches trying to elbow their way up
Well,
and
like, I don't know if you watched it, Hacks with Jean Smart.
oh gosh, that's a great show.
It's a
And
wonderful show, and she keeps winning. I really love the fact that she keeps winning over all of the younger people. It's
that
like
and
it's
very much
so
deserved
fabulous.
so. So and I remember she did a show, was it Mayor of Eastwick, where she played the mother of, oh gosh, what's the actress name? She was in Titanic. Kate Winslet. She played Kate Winslet's mother. And then right after that, Hacks came out, and I thought, what of? versatile
Oh,
actress.
she is, yeah.
She's not only funny and quick-witted, but the
Oh,
Mayor of
I know.
Eastwick was just a whole different
Yeah,
style of,
yeah,
but, her performance was very understated, and she was this, kind of a desperate mother trying to keep her family happy and
yeah,
having a difficult time.
yeah. But she's so, I mean, just when you watch these people, and naturally, her show is really a lot of dialogue too. Because
Oh,
and
yeah.
Hannah's good. It's great. It's a really good show. But it's really, every time I'm watching these shows, and I go, "Yay for women!" Because people of her age years ago, goodbye. That's it. They weren't going
Right,
anywhere.
right. They had a short career, and,
Very, yeah, yeah,
so what I love is that people like, Reese Witherspoon and Nicole
yeah.
Kidman are still working, but they're also behind the scenes working.
Oh,
They're
they're great.
authoring
I love.
books, and
Yeah.
they're creating their own, productions, and that's,
Yeah.
I think, how they're controlling their future
That's
because
so
they
great.
realize.
I mean, because that's what you need to do. But I think, nowadays people really make a lot of money. I think that if you look back, but you would know this too, they did not make these salaries that the people make now.
Oh, yeah. No, no, they were, studio players, and they
Yeah.
had, pretty good contracts. Oh, and that was Mayor of Easttown. I was thinking it was Eastwick.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's right. Oh, I love
Mayor of
that one.
Easttown, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
was thinking of Witches of Eastwick, which was also a brilliant
Oh, that
film,
was good too. Yes.
but
Share. So, I love movies, and, I like reading, but I also love audiobooks because, for me, it also helps my writing to listen to dialogue. And I think a lot of people don't want to listen to audiobooks, but I talk about it every time I'm on a show because it really is. Um, it's a very good help for authors also because
Mhm.
you're listening to someone else's story, and even if you have an audiobook yourself, it's almost like I've said this about my audiobooks. I listen and I feel like I didn't even write it. So I mean, it's such a good experience.
and it's, you sometimes when you read, your interpretation is different than when you hear,
Yeah,
so that's important too, and there's a new feature as a script writer. I work in a program called Final Draft,
yeah, me
and
too.
there's a new feature where you can assign voices and have it
Yeah, I just got it upgraded. Yeah, I just
read
did.
to you, and it's a tool.
It's a
It's a
great
tool in
tool.
the toolbox, and I can't imagine going back to the days when you were writing scripts on a typewriter because,
Well, I remember when I was a literary agent. So my clients, I had started writing screenplays and I was books, but then I couldn't find an agent ever. So I said, well, maybe I'll try. So I did try. And I became a signatory agent, So, I think that people, screenwriting is such a great form of learning how to do dialogue and things like that. But I forgot what I was even going to say because I had so many thoughts at one time. But I became an agent because you couldn't get one, and so I think that I actually had a client of mine on the show. I don't do this now, but I think now people really have a shot at it if they push themselves. But in your career, that's what I was really getting to your career because I like to talk about. You have a great career because when we last spoke, that's when you were on the show. I think last. That's
right, it's been several years, so definitely that was it.
And then I noticed you have other movies that I didn't even know about. See,
Oh,
that's the
yeah.
thing. I didn't have you. I know you're on Facebook and all these things, but I don't see you all the time.
Well, it's that whole thing of I'm
Right.
not
So
sure how our thread or our, you know,
that's
when
what happened a
we
couple
sign
weeks
on, I don't know how
ago.
I urge people I don't even know are showing up with all kinds of things. I don't wanna
Right.
see somebody I've never met before is a bad picture of their meal that they fixed last night.
Oh yeah. That's yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's not what I'm doing on social media, and I'm
Well,
really
I saw
trying to
you.
be.
That's when I saw you. I went, "Oh my God, there she is." That's what I
I
texted.
just randomly showed up on your
Yeah.
face.
I have like four or five accounts. I have too many things, so that's not a good thing. But what I could say is, being a screenwriter and doing all these things, I love to have screenwriters on. And so I see myself that you have a couple I didn't see.
Right. I've directed several features, I
Yes,
think, since the last time we spoke.
yes. And
And
I got them on my list, on my watch list now.
I
It's
have 6 projects, that I'm lined up to do. Now, whether or
really,
not any or all of them happen, I tell people, and a lot of folks wouldn't understand this, but I feel like the plate juggler
yeah.
on Ed Sullivan's show, where he has all the spinning plates on the rods, and they're up in the air, and he's spinning and spinning and spinning, and that's what I feel like right now, but something's gonna land, I'm certain of it, and I'm working with some really great people, executive producers, and the hardest part is um, finding the financing, the funding, and
Yeah,
then
I
right
know.
now with it's a little crazy in the world, I have to say, and people don't know what where things are going
Oh,
with
it's
stock
very hard.
market.
That
So
that reminds me of what I
I'm
was
dealing with
saying about
that right now that it
you have to have
could
money.
impact,
Yeah, you
but
have
there's a lot of people with money out there, and that's where I'm like, okay, it is a little bit of a risky investment to invest in a film, but
yeah,
if you believe
yeah,
in the story and if you partner with the right team, because I always say this is show business and it
yep.
is a business, and I can only keep working if the product that I deliver to the executive producers works for them. So that's a big part of what I'm trying to do is the balance of creating something that is memorable,
Yeah,
something that falls within the budget that they've allocated for the production, and something that is unique, and also something that does a return on their investment so that they come back and ask me to do more. So the good news is I've done that.
because
Uh,
you write about family. I mean, you direct. I mean, you care about family, and
I
so
do, and
even what
part
you
of
were just
that's
saying in
my
the beginning,
nature.
like your
I've,
grandmother and
I've,
grandfather, that's where
um,
you started because that's why you are into family.
I believe, yeah, you just nailed it on the head, and I think that's part of who I am. I was offered a script to direct not too long ago, and it was a little too dark and out of my
Yeah,
I call out of my level of interest, and I said,
yeah,
"I appreciate that, but I don't think I'm the person for this job."
yeah.
And I think me stepping away was a good choice because this is something you live with for a long period of time, and it's not that I don't like dark content. I'm actually working on a really incredible project. It's been a couple years in the making, but it's true story about a young girl, 1939 Poland.
Mhm.
Her family they're Jewish. The Nazis came in, abducted the father, never to be seen again. He was a incredible philosophy professor, very kind of an erudite, and had one of the greatest collections of books in Eastern Europe. The Nazis took all the books as they come and do, and then took mom and daughters off to a ghetto where they work camp, and they were barely surviving. I mean, barely surviving. And
Yeah.
then the Nazis came in to liquidate the camp. That's where the story really begins because the little girl miraculously survives and lives evading the Nazis in the woods of Poland for 2.5 years by herself. Now she would come across people randomly. Some were pretty nefarious and pretty bad actors and would take advantage of her. Others were trying to help or just trying to survive. So it's a true story. I've got the life rights with the book's author, and we've been developing it, and it's just incredibly
I
powerful.
think
I'd
I
come back.
remember that you were doing this, right? Because
Yeah, I
I,
went to Poland this summer to do some more research on the topic of the Jewish ghettos, just to make sure I got it right. A lot of historical background, also to see what the woods were like in Poland, get a sense of architecture, what was happening, and the timeline for the rise of Nazism and Hitler in
I
that
wrote,
part.
I also, I think you know, I wrote a book to life about a survivor, and years ago, I think it's 15 years, I don't know. And I was just at the Holocaust Museum, and I was talking about this last week. There's one in Illinois, in Skokie, Illinois, and they have the hologram now where the woman, they're talking, and it's incredible because well, I guess they're going to, actually, it's a very big museum here, but they're going to make it even bigger and better. but it's so important. And there's a couple movies that have been out, uh, lately about it. And I don't know, did you see the movie we were talking about last week, Treasure, with Lena Dunham?
No, I've not seen that.
Well, if you're writing about this and doing a show, watch this movie because,
Treasure.
yeah,
Okay.
right, and because it really gets into like the father. She's on a trip with her father to try to understand how, because most survivor children that live in America and they don't understand because, and they don't even like to hear about it sometimes because I had that with the person I wrote. They didn't want to hear about it because they don't want to believe that their mother went through something like that.
Right. And it was also one of these things where don't talk about it.
Yes,
That's the past. The past is the past.
right.
So Charlene, the woman that I'm this book is based on, she was 10 when she went into the woods, uh, about 13 when she was finally rescued and emancipated,
Right.
and she did survive. And then she came to the United States to stay with an aunt, and then eventually married. And ironically, her husband was in the U.S. military, worked himself up to brigadier general,
Uh-huh.
and they retired. Well, ended up at the Pentagon for the last few years of his service,
Wow.
and then he said, "Now it's your turn." And the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington D.C. was getting underway, and so she got very involved with this
Right.
museum and became a spokesperson and one of their greatest witnesses to the Holocaust and
Yeah.
through living testimony. So you can see her testimony is still very much a part of the U.S. Holocaust Museum. But in addition to that, they had writing groups where the survivors would get together, and sometimes these folks were told, "Oh, it's in the past. Just let it go, let it go."
Yeah,
Well,
I'm
all
just going to
the
say
stories,
because I can't imagine because a lot of times they don't like to, because every single one of them has their own story.
right? And so they were encouraged to write about their stories, and that's how this book kind of got underway. And then the writer of the book met and heard Charlene speaking at the Holocaust Museum, and then they became
Yeah.
very strong friends. And then through that, her story truly unfolded.
Well, if
The
you have
mirror.
any questions or anything, you can call me because
Okay.
if she actually passed away a few years, Sarah Lewis, but I went every day to do her story. And when I did it, she also was a spokesperson at the Holocaust Museum, but I went with her and the kids, I think the other museums also have kids come, but the schools bring their kids there, like the whole class.
Mhm.
And not what was so amazing, they were like 12 and 13. They didn't utter a word. They listened to her and not they were so like just it was a pin could drop. And when she was done, they'd all rush up to her because to them she was like Anne Frank.
Right. And that's the same reaction the crowds had with Charlene as well,
Yeah.
because I guess they were just so
Yep.
entranced by this story, this child,
Yep.
eating tree bark and bugs and
Oh,
scat and just surviving by pure will to live. She had hope that she would find her family again. Unfortunately, she did not. But
no, I know. But
the
they people one at a time. Like in her house in Poland, she they took first the brother, they went off each one, and finally they all went
yeah,
except for her, and she couldn't get in her house, and her mother told her to go to the playground, so she did, but not even her relatives would take her in. She sat on someone's step.
yeah, and that's what's so frightening. And I, not to go about you know making this a sad story, but it seems like we need these Holocaust stories more now than ever because I don't think people understand that we're
Right.
kind of treading into these dangerous waters again with anti-Semitism and some of
Oh,
the things.
we're here. But, and the thing about when you listen to these stories, the reason I wrote her book, I met her while I was walking in on the track in a health club, and we met and we kept talking, and she told me she was a survivor, and I found it so interesting. But, I think one of the things is every story is so wonderful because the people that are alive, they were such survivors. Like in her case, she had a regular, after she was done, she was a model, she was a speaker, she did a lot of things. So I wrote the book because I wanted people to see that after the camp, she had a life. She had children, grandchildren, and so that's what people should see. That's not like when they're alive afterwards. A lot of people didn't make it. So the ones that did, that will tell their story, just knowing that they made it, and
Right.
and
And that
how.
they're willing to share that experience
Yes.
with
Well,
others.
Steven Spielberg did that, and I think that they're all in all the museums. Everybody, and it was a long process that he did. There's, of all the survivors that would talk, you know.
Right.
But my point was to say that she at first the story was called Survivor, but I thought because people thought maybe it was breast cancer or something else, so I changed it to life because she had so much life in her,
Hmm.
and so that's why these stories need to be out to show that even after the worst of circumstances, you can survive and live and have a life.
And that's what this story is all about, is, uh, story, and I think one of the things that I worry about these days is with people's short attention span, that the stories are getting contracted,
Yeah,
shorter, tighter, less room to just really contemplate and explore. So, and I don't have anything against TikTok, but 25 seconds versus 25 minutes versus
yeah,
two hours, obviously there's a world of difference in what kind of information you can share, what's taken away, the
yeah,
importance of that information. And I hope that we don't get so um, used to these short form projects
yeah.
that we lose the ability to read. And lately, because it's been so dark out there in the world, I have been going to books to read, and I'm like, this is kind of going back to what I loved in the past.
Yeah.
And through the books, I'm actually learning to appreciate letting something just unfold. And so that's even impacting me how I'm writing. And maybe my films aren't going to appeal to an 18-year-old because they don't move fast enough. But I think that there are a lot of people that are more mature, that are looking for something good to watch. And
I
so,
think young people like to hear stories like this, though. I
well,
think they do, and I think young people are growing up, younger people, I mean, and they're young enough that they are growing up to realize the world is, we have LGBTQ, and I think they understand it, and I think they're not bothered by it. And
and
so,
I think that scares some people, that people
yeah,
aren't, and that's where I'm like, if no harm, no foul, what's the big
yeah,
deal?
yeah,
Where if someone's out there harming you or harming others, there's something inherently wrong with that. But if you're just doing your life and you're being your own true self, flying your freak flag or doing whatever it is that you do, as long as you're not harming anyone, why should someone repress someone for that? And it's interesting, all these parallels between, we were talking about the Holocaust
right.
and what was happening. And then today I was reading that Dr. Maya Angelou's book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, was pulled out
Uh,
of the U.S. Naval Library. I'm like, why would they take that book out of our military's
mm.
um, library? And I don't understand. I'm like, that's
I
a
don't
very
understand a
important.
lot of it. I just don't. And, a book is a book. And that's why I tell people all the time, once you write a book, it's there somewhere. I don't know who buys my book. It could be at some school. And that's the good part of writing, is that you don't know where everything is, and your message is always going to be out there. So by taking books away, that's not good. We have to have history. We need it.
We do have and need to have context. And I was very fortunate. I did a 13 episode series with Dr. Angelo.
Oh, you
This
did?
was several years ago. It was an incredible project, and what a wonderful, fascinating woman. You walk into the room and you can just tell there's this aura about her. She was so brilliant, so
Yeah,
wise, but so
yeah.
kind, and so worldly. I just can't say enough about who she was and how she was. I have an autographed copy of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And if you read that book, you have an understanding of the plight of what she faced. But again, like the woman that you were talking about, the Holocaust survivor from um, uh, Poland, and the young gal that I'm doing the story about as well. These are all survivors, and their stories are so important and so
Yes.
compelling. And that's where I feel like, why are we repressing these? Why are we not telling these? Because that's the human spirit of, really breaking
Who
through
we
and
are. That
doing
is who we are, or who we should be, or
who we
what
should be. And
we care
Dr.
about.
Angela, in this is one conversation that I had with her. She mentioned Tupac,
Yeah,
RFK,
mhm,
JFK,
yeah,
Martin Luther King, and this was all in one statement that she made to me. She was
yeah.
talking about all of these people. I'm like, oh my gosh.
I know.
And we were very fortunate that each episode we had a different guest. And in that particular episode, we had LeVar Burton
Wow.
and Louis Gossett Jr.
Yeah.
And they
From
were
from school.
tracing their past as a artist, and they all met on Alex Haley's series Roots,
Roots, yeah.
which was about slavery.
Yeah.
And here it is, another story that's trying to be squashed,
Mhm,
where they're taking Harriet Tubman off the. Fortunately, there was enough backlash that they've put her back on some of the federal websites. Why you would remove Miss Tubman from
I know.
is beyond me.
You
So
know,
anyway, it's
see,
that
that's the thing.
whole thing
That's
of
the problem, that they're removing
history.
things. The Holocaust bookstore does have books that are not just about the Holocaust, but are, books that people should, well, not should read. I mean, it's just reading that is good for them, to learn about people.
Mhm.
I think that I always, you have to learn. You can't just, if you think you know everything, then you know nothing.
Oh,
You know
do
nothing
I
because you
know
have,
what I know. I know what I don't know. I don't know what I don't know. So it's weird. It's this thing. When I was working on telling Charlene's story, I went to her synagogue in Washington D.C. and sat down with her rabbi, and I said, I was asking him what she was like because she's since passed, and he
right,
said, "Let me take you to the library." So he walked me into the library at the synagogue and there was this whole wall of books on the Holocaust. And he said every one of these books was donated to the synagogue by Charlene because she wanted people to know
yeah.
hers was not the only story, that there were so many other stories that needed to be told. And so, yes, this is an interesting time when we're banning books or burning books or destroying public record on the internet
Well,
about our history.
I was watching TV and I came across an old movie, which is Peyton Place,
Oh,
which,
yes, yes, that was kind of a racy film
yeah,
for its time. Now it's pretty
and
not
and
risque
they're
at
taking
all.
the books and burning them. You
Yeah.
know, the people in the library didn't want to have her book in there. On Return to Peyton Place, I think it was the one I saw. But
Mhm.
and that's what people were doing. They just, and they did it in the past. And right now we thought we came, like when I wrote Salah's book, I mean, I'm Jewish, but when I talked to her, I had a box of Kleenex there because I thought I knew things, but I didn't know anything
Mhm.
until I talked to her because it was
Well,
so, I've learned things, but not like she told me. And I wrote her book exactly how she told me. And I was afraid to ask her, if she wanted to write a piece. I did everything because I didn't even know if she could write. I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to hurt her. But she could read. I knew that afterwards, but she liked that I read to her. And I, after I did the book, it made me a different person.
And that's one of the reasons I like to tell stories is
Right.
to cause people to think about their actions, who they are, who they're being,
Right.
and maybe even make a shift. And that's, whether it's when we last spoke and the whole idea of these
Oh,
two
yeah,
little
yeah.
girls.
Cloris Leachman. That,
Yeah, and these little girls being raised by
oh my God.
grandparents, and the impact of losing their mother on their lives.
Yeah.
And so I do think that every time we write or produce or do something that is in story, hopefully there's a takeaway from someone else, that they come away from that experience having learned or grown or rethinking how they are being in the world.
It's so hard to get a movie made though. I mean, it
Oh
is
my gosh,
so hard.
it's hard. I feel like I work two jobs.
Right.
One is to create the content that's currently in front of me,
Right.
and the other is to
That
be,
funding. Yeah.
looking for the funding and working with different executives to get the projects, produced. And I don't mind doing lower budget projects, but I'm also of the mind that I have to pick and choose where I'm spending my time these days, because it's got to be something I'm totally passionate about and really interested in, and dedicating months, if not years, to getting it getting it finalized.
But when you see people talking on TV, if they've won an award, it didn't just happen yesterday. They
No,
work hard to get. They go 10 years, 15 years, five
yeah,
years. You know, and,
absolutely.
and so like to me, when I see everybody out there, I have a lot of guests on my show that they have so many books, I can't even imagine how they do it. I I'm very fussy, and I've taken a lot of my screenplays and make them into books. And because I think that's what people should do if they can write a book, because then there's stories out there. Because screenplays are stuck in people's drawers because no
Yeah,
one will ever see them.
yeah. There's a lot of. I have 6 scripts on my credenza right now
Yeah.
that I've written that are in various stages of development, and pre-production, and then there's 2 other scripts that I'm working with other script writers on. So getting produced. So
And the
it's
bad part is when you get now, if you get an option, well, it seems like that's the thing. If you get an option, even if it doesn't work, people think, oh, this is a better writer. So when you say you've had an option, they go, oh, great. But then you don't get any money for the option these days.
no, and there's a lot of people out there with scripts. I can't tell you. I get
And
solicitations all the time. I had someone reach out to me this morning that has 2 scripts that they want me to read, and I'm thinking, I
I had
just
over a
really.
I had over 100 clients, and let me tell you, they were so good because they were really good, and they didn't get produced.
Mhm. No, and that's not uncommon. And
No,
and then sometimes you say, "How in the world did this get funded?"
I say that every day. Every time I'm watching TV, every time I'm watching, I go like a
Who's
movie online. I
how
go
they
like,
how do they do that?
you know,
It is kinda crazy. You wonder
yeah.
how things get greenlit.
So, what would you want to tell people out there? Because I know there are people listening that they want to have their movie done. And what steps would you say that they need to take so they don't get? I feel like I don't want people to stop writing. That's why I've done this show for 16 years, because I want people to continue, because nobody knows that their script won't get taken. So if you don't ever do anything, it
A
won't get taken.
Absolutely. That's just
So what do you tell people?
as far as how do they get their scripts
And how
produced?
do they just sustain themselves and keep going?
Yeah, you just have to you have to be so diligent and so uncompromising to get a project made. You really have to work hard at it. And I've had offers to option a script, but I knew that it was going to sit on a credenza, and it would become uh, a dust collector. And I said, nope, I'm going to hang on to that baby. And
Yeah.
So 10 years later, I still have that screenplay, but I do have an executive producer that read it recently and loves it. So a lot of it is timing, and those are things that obviously we can't control. Another thing is meeting people and the right people. And so the gentleman that I'm talking with now about this particular project doubled the budget. He said, "No, I think we need to double the budget. I appreciate you bringing it in at this
Right,
price,
right,
but I think in order for us to do what we need to do, let's double it." So I'm like, okay.
right.
I don't
And
have that happen that often. Now the money's not in the
okay,
bank,
yeah,
and that's another part of it too. Is that you can work for years trying to get something secure and a deal, and it's still in limbo.
I
I
know.
have director's agreements with executive producers where I have legal contracts that are drawn up by entertainment attorneys, and you have money that you've invested where you've gone out to pitch, you've been in the rooms in LA, you've been in meetings, you've gotten the I's dotted and T's crossed, and then all of a sudden it just blows up in your face and you're back to square one. So
I know.
I'm not saying that to be a defeatist. I'm just saying that's just the nature of this industry.
It's not a defeatist, it's just what happens, I mean,
It's what happens. And so you have to have a thick skin, but
yeah,
you also have to have a soul, and
yeah,
those are the,
right,
the contrast, because if you don't have a thick skin, then you're not going to get to be able to tell your story. And the soul is what you need to have the story become human and real and
yeah.
relatable. So I'm always walking that fine line. I'm not getting my feathers ruffled if something blows up,
Mm.
but also to keep pushing. And that's why I'm going back to that whole the spinning plates in the Ed Sullivan Show, or I'll even liken it to juggling flaming bowling balls, and they're all up in the air and they're all on fire, and I got to keep them in motion or they're going to drop to the floor. But which one is going to stay, with me, and which one is going to get greenlit, and which one am I working on next?
Because
And
if you're really a writer, you just it is. I know this sounds insane, but it's not really about the money. It's
no, no,
we
and
love,
it's
we
never
love
been about the
right.
money.
We love these projects. We love the characters. We want them out there. They're like my friend was laughing. I call them like my people. They're like my people, because they're so much a part of me. Not me as far as the characters, but it's me. I think about them, and even if I'm not working about on them, I still think about them, and I want to get it out there.
It is funny because I'm also an avid gardener, and I have organic gardens and pr- pretty a lot of things that I've done architectural landscaping and things like that. So uh, my joy is to go out and work there. But while I'm working, I'm always thinking about these characters, these stories, and so they never really leave me. And I guess I'm obsessive. I guess I'm one of those people that I'm a workaholic.
Yeah,
But I've found ways to, embrace that in my nature, the workaholic feature, but not have it kill me. So that's where I'll go
right,
outside and I'll have a greenhouse, and I'll be in my greenhouse at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, checking out all my plants, make sure that things are getting ready to be transplanted out of there into the ground. And I always think that these plants are almost like my stories, that I'm cultivating
right.
them and
Well,
growing
it's
them
right,
and nurturing them, and
right.
hopefully they bear fruit, or vegetables. And there's
I'm not good with plants at all. When I used to be working, and the doctors I worked for used to say, "Okay, I'm going away. Like, can you try to keep this plant alive while I'm gone?" Because they knew I wasn't really good at this, and luckily, the plants were alive when they came back. But some people, I'm not. But see, that's the thing. It is something like that because you're keeping it alive in your head.
exactly. And it's interesting because as time progresses, things change, characters change. The one story that I was telling you about, that the I have an executive producer that really likes it, and he's doubled the budget. When I started writing that, things were a little different, and now it's a coming of age story during the Jim Crow era.
Oh,
So it revolves around a movie theater. So I was writing what I know
right, right,
about
right. Yeah.
the Great Depression, Jim Crow era, what I'd learned from my grandparents, and then applying that to this story. But things are shifting within, our within society. So I want to make sure I am not stuck in the past as I'm writing this because it needs to
Right.
have a future proof kind of
Yeah.
a way of being. And so I've had the script vetted recently just to make sure that it's still strong. And then I did some rewrites based on notes that I got. And even though the script was a Nichols Fellowship finalist, and
Oh, great.
that's a big deal, but that was years ago. So I want to make sure that it's still relevant. And so we always, and I would imagine anything great that's been written has been rewritten, and
Oh,
I will rewrite this script until the day that it's produced and those lines are delivered.
I
And
people laugh though, but when I write a script, like say, let's say one line, I could write that line 16 times, which I have till I get that exactly the way the person talks.
mhm.
And if I don't, I have to redo it again because it's just not right.
Well, and it's funny because I inherited the script recently from the same executive producer. He said, "What do you think of this?" I said, "It's a great story, but it needs a lot of work. In
Yeah,
fact, it needs a rewrite from page 1." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Because everybody has the same voice. I don't
yeah,
know who I'm listening to.
right,
I
right,
think this was the person that wrote it, as a true story, it happened to them. So I appreciate what they were trying to do, but they did not know how to tell it in a script screenplay form. So we've
yeah,
since then brought on a writer that's WGA, has credible screen credits. And I was just on the phone with her on, let's see, today's Wednesday. I was on the phone with her on Monday, and we're going through the what I call the very critical process of rewrites. I'm not writing it, but I'm directing it. So I'm giving her notes and thoughts on the characters and the personalities and the voice. So she's coming at it with a very strong vision of what it can be with a good story that
yeah,
was true, that was just poorly written. And I don't mean to say that the writer didn't know what they were doing. They did not know how to write for the screen, nor
yeah,
did they know how to write for personality and characters. I guess they were so close to it. It was something that they had lived.
right,
So in their mind, they thought they were delivering something that would work, but it's not. So I
right,
think that we always have to be bear in mind that as you get close to something, you might be so close that you don't know what you're even looking at. And it's good to have outside objective viewpoints, but it's also good to be true to the story. And so that's where that's that fine line of finding the balance of story, finding the balance of character, finding the balance of what are the right words. And I know that there's some people, it has to be said exactly like this on the page. Well, I sometimes find that when I cast for movies, I'll get actors that find their character and find a way to even make it even better.
right,
So, what I've been doing lately is table reads with the scripts, with actors, and they may not end up being cast in the film, but they're certainly auditioning for me and giving it their best, and with the hopes that they end up in the film. And a lot of these are friends of mine that are actors that I feel like I could ask their opinions, and I will cast them whenever I can. And it's worked really well for me because I hear a whole different story than what I've written once it's being read and once it's being performed. And there are new tools. We were talking about tools earlier.
uh-huh,
I'll be using a Zoom call, and I might have 22 actors on that Zoom call with the 22 spoken roles, record it. Then afterwards, I ask them each if they have any thoughts to reach back out to me and give me their thoughts on their character and other characters. And that has become a very good sounding board for turning a good script into a great script.
See, what
And
I
that
wanted to do years ago was have a radio show that did like a soap opera type, like they did in the old days, where you have people reading scripts, and just have doing the show, doing whatever story it is online. I think
Right.
they do it in the BBC, I think, but I thought people would really like that. So at one time it did have, like, a reading of it, and I thought that's a really good thing to do. It was so much fun, you know, because what do people do when they really like? I'm thinking a lot of the stories could be heard online, let's say as a soap opera, let's just say, because people kind of like series now.
Oh
But
yeah.
I want to say, and I remembered what I was thinking about about Final Draft. When one of my first clients, I looked at his script and I kept saying, "How does he have such a great? How did he do that on the typewriter? It's like perfect, you know. How is that possible?" He said, "Oh, Final Draft." So when I got Final Draft, all your worries are, because you can't make a mistake. It's right there, and so I think that would help people if you're trying to write a script. Get Final Draft so it guides you, so you don't, because you don't really need the point of view like years ago as much. I don't know if you probably do because you're a director, mate, but the less there is on the page is what I think people would rather see.
Well, it's interesting, and a lot of people don't understand that when you write a screenplay, it is not just for the actors. It is the blueprint for the architectural blueprint for the physical production.
Right.
It's everything from the cast, the wardrobe, the props,
Yep.
the cinematographer, and so everyone's reading that as a department head and trying to figure out what they can contribute to the
Yeah.
story. So that's a big part of writing a screenplay. And it's so much different than a book, and it's very, very
Yeah.
different than anything else. So, what I like and what I appreciate is when I do get a good script and I have my department heads and we do a read through, everyone starts pitching how they think they're going to bring that to life.
Well,
Well, I'll
good.
know within
It's-
15 seconds whether or
Yeah.
not this is the right production designer or the right
Right.
wardrobe
Right. Right.
supervisor
Yeah.
because of what they're saying. And if
They
they're
don't
not,
see what you
I
see.
have
They
to
don't
guide
see
them
it.
in
Yeah.
how much time do I need to spend with that
Right.
person versus
Right.
can I let them go? I had this one incredible wardrobe supervisor, I called her costume designer on this movie because she got it. And she brought bolts of fabric, and we would sit down and look at McCall's and Butterick patterns. And I said, "That's it. That's it." These, and she was making these clothes
Oh,
to the period from that era with the fabrics. And I just knew I could step away and let
right.
her thing. And that's what she loved, that we were on such the same page.
Right. Which is hard
And
to get to. It's hard to get to the same page a lot of times.
well,
That's
and part of that is again, understanding why you're putting that note in the script.
right.
She got the note on multiple occasions and she walked away knowing exactly what she needed to do. And even my director of photography walked away because he understood what I was trying to visually do with the story. And I do think that as writers and as storytellers, everything that is in that frame influences the story.
Right.
And what is it that the camera sees that the audience is seeing that clues them in? And it's everything from a prop that someone's holding. And
Right.
I'll go back to a movie I directed years ago with James Hong, and I don't know if you know who he is, but he's an incredible actor. He's been in Blade Runner and Chinatown, and he
Oh,
was
I
in
probably do that. Then I
Everything
probably
Everywhere All at Once, and he just won the Academy Award as I guess an ensemble cast, I think,
oh,
for that.
from right. Oh, okay.
Everything All Everywhere All at Once. And Mr.
I
Hong
know who that is. Oh, I know who that is.
actually, when we were in pre-pro, and he said, "I would really like to have certain props," as he was a store owner. And I said, "Let's talk about what props you want." And I was so enamored with him and his questions and what he wanted. I said, absolutely, yes, I will have those for you in advance so you can choose the ones that you think are truly part of your character. And we had such a great rapport on set
That's great.
because there was a level of respect. My gosh, the guys worked with Ridley Scott,
Yeah,
and
right,
so he's worked with the best of the best, and so I
right.
was um, thrilled that he wanted to engage me. And this was 12, 15 years ago that I did this film, and I do think that he came up from his character. Now he wasn't trying to push anything else on me, but he was there for his character and to make his character the best it could be. And
Yeah,
part of that,
it's so important that everybody works well together. I mean, but that's what happens. Projects start and they don't, and it doesn't work. So that when you say, "Oh, director dropped out, this one dropped out," because if you don't work together, if your film doesn't work right.
oh, and I think it's a collaborative.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
It, I always say filmmaking is a team sport.
See,
Um,
I always said that too because I thought if a good movie would be when the director, writer, producer, every and the actors all together make a story good. So if they work together from the beginning, you'd have a great story. But then you don't have that a lot of times because it doesn't work that way. But it would be better if they could do that.
right, and that's where I hear about all this tension and dissension on set, and I that's not how I work, and I don't know people that do. I think people perform better when you're in you're a mode which you're giving the creative freedom to explore and
Yeah,
be a contributor
yeah,
and not be stifled. And the only time I did have a couple of comments one time when I was working with a very experienced actor, but he came in with this really hokey Southern accent, and he's not from the South. And I said, not going to do that.
yeah.
And he looked at me and said, boy, that's pretty harsh. I said, well, I just know what I heard, and that's not going to work. So we've got to rethink how your characters are.
Sometimes I used to tell people just write Southern accent. Don't put the accent in the dialogue.
Right. And the weird thing is some people can pull it off and some people can't. I
Yeah.
remember Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, and I love Kevin Spacey's performance in that, but he had a horrible Southern accent,
Yeah, yeah,
and it almost took me out of the movie, even though he was a central character. But then years later, he turned up in a film a series called House of Cards, and he also played a Southerner in
uh-huh,
that film,
yeah.
and he was able to pull off the Southern accent. So he must have gotten somebody's
Right, right.
feedback that said, "You sound horrible," and he said, "I'm gonna go work on this."
Hard, yeah, yeah.
It's
Don't be who you're not. It's very difficult sometimes. Yeah, I think
yeah.
so. That's like with an audiobook too. So, all right. So I'm so happy you came on today because I love to talk about screenwriting. It's my favorite, and for all the people listening that are screenwriters, do not give up. I think Inktip is now, they said, after all these years, they're doing something new, which I hope I keep going on Inktip and off, but I think the premise is good, but it's just hard to get that deal made.
Oh, yeah. And,
But they said they're doing something new, so I hope so.
and there are a lot of resources out there, and the great news is they're accessible at the couple of strokes on the keyboard,
Yeah.
and, a lot of insight and information that's out there, and some of it's good, some of it's bad. You'll have to discern on your own, but, a good place to start is just at your computer, and then another great place to start or to go is American Film Market out in Santa Monica, and I think there are a lot of really solid films that have come to fruition by relationships that have made at AFM, and that's a big part of it too, is getting your foot in the door, meeting people, and just putting your best foot forward, and
Well, my biggest mistake was I followed the rules and didn't send my scripts because I was the agent, because you're not supposed to if you're a WGA.
right,
So I followed the rules, and I probably should have sent my script because now there are no rules. So
right.
those, you know, and because you couldn't get anywhere without having a WGA agent either, but now you can get places. It's very different. And I think a lot of stars don't understand how many scripts that their agents aren't letting them see.
Oh, absolutely. I think, that's not uncommon,
No.
and,
Yep.
So the good news is there's a project that I'm involved in that'll hopefully happen this year, where we have two pretty high level actors attached to it, only because the producer on this project has worked with them in the past, and he got the
Right.
scripts directly to them in person as
Yeah.
opposed to doing the
That's how it works,
traditional
right?
route.
Well,
So
that's like what we were talking about, Katherine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy, and a lot of the others. They worked well together, so they had them together in other films.
right, there's that synergy. So I think that that's a big part of,
Yeah.
and you can see it if you look at Spielberg's crew.
Yep.
He's got the same crew on a lot
Yep.
of his
As he,
films,
oh, okay. Well, yeah.
and
I
that's
can
that.
help.
Quentin Tarantino does it. The Coen Brothers do it. So
Yeah.
it's not uncommon because being on set is being with your family, and you want to have a
Yeah.
good rapport.
It's
And
important.
you're
Yep.
it's 14, 15 hours a day, if not more,
Right.
6 days a week, if not 7 days a week. Because when you're not filming, you're prepping, and you just have to really be. Um, you have to have some kind of synergy and kindred.
Which is why I like to have the same guests on my shows because I feel like I like to know how they're going and we can talk about different things that we all know that we like together, and after 16 years of shows, I have tons of people that I know that if I have them on a show, it's going to be fun because we're just going to be able to talk about whatever, which is like you. So will you come back when you want, anytime you want to just talk about the shows or what you're doing, just
I'll be
know.
happy to, and I'll tell you when the next films are coming out.
Okay.
So
Yes,
uh,
and just
keep your
send
fingers
me the
crossed
link.
that I'm
Don't
got one of
trust
these.
the social media because this is not a good thing lately.
Yeah. So let's just reach out anytime, and
Okay.
love to
All right. All
talk
right.
and
Good
share
luck
more
and thank
insight.
you.
And I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. Thank
Oh,
you.
good. It's great. And I'll send you the link and we'll put the link all over so people can hear what you have to say because it's very important. It's important to listen to people that are successful
Well, thank
because
you,
it
and
helps,
I
you know.
appreciate you so much, Marsha. This has
Okay,
been
take
great.
care. All
All
right.
right.
Have a great week.
All
And
right.
it's almost Thursday. It's only Wednesday. I don't know. What can I say? The week's over for me. Keeps going. Bye. Thank you.
Take
Take care.
care.
Bye
Bye.
bye.